Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hey folks, it is Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon, and I have with me LinkedIn and career coach Sharon Hamersley. She has been helping people of all ages to make satisfying career decisions and to acquire the skills that they need for job search to demonstrate their true value to prospective employers. She has been doing this for 20 years. And is based out of Columbus, Ohio, where she also teaches career workshops on job search, networking, resumes, and more for several local nonprofits. She leverages earlier work experience that spans the public and private sector and organizations from 10 to 10,000 to develop strategies that bring out the best in individuals and improve the organizational performance. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me. Did I just butcher your last name?
No, you got it right. I should actually put that out on LinkedIn, now that they have that
the pronunciation tool
feature. Yep.
I would have loved that. I use my married name, but my maiden name was Brutal. That would have saved me a lot of pain if they'd had that tool back when.
Yep.
So Sharon, you were going to give a brief overview. I'd love to hear more about how you came to be in the role that you're in today.
Well, actually, most of my career has been in some way associated with career development. One of my first jobs was as an academic advisor at Ohio State, where I worked with students mostly in the arts and sciences, and especially with pre-professional students intending to go on to graduate school, medical school, law school, those types of things, to help them, guide them through that application process. But also part of that is just making sure that they were on a good path. And so I did a lot of career development, and sometimes it was delivering pretty painful news, which is basically you need to do something different here because this is not going to work.
This is not working. You will not graduate at this rate.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you're definitely not going to get into medical school. I didn't put it quite that bluntly.
Yeah.
But so I've always had that interest and desire just to help people develop and move along a professional path that's a good fit for them. And so that's actually how I got my start. And then I decided to leave academia and go into the corporate world. That's the 10,000 or more employees part. I actually got a degree from Ohio State in human resource and organizational development. And so I went out into the corporate world, and that actually taught me a lot too about how things work. And I had some personal experiences with getting laid off and also actually fired for poor performance once. So that's what I bring to the table now in terms of working with people wherever they are in their career transition, whether they've been laid off, they're looking to change directions or whatever it is. I bring all of that to the table.
You do. Yeah, I didn't realize you had that complete other end of the side of the table, especially, being laid off and being fired for performance, because those are challenges that are very real right now.
Yeah.
So given that you work with a wide variety, and you have worked with a wide variety of job seekers, what do you see as sort of a couple of major challenges that you see facing people that are either looking to make a career pivot or who are jumping into job search today?
Well, one of the things that I find especially challenging right now, and this is just for everybody, it's the uncertainty. We are in truly uncharted waters at the moment. And I think that adds a layer of challenge that maybe even a year ago we didn't have. There are still some basic things that I think are true and are challenging for people looking for a job or to change career. And one of the biggest challenges and something I help people with is identifying what their skill sets are and how they can transfer those skill sets to other industries or how they can market those skill sets to prospective employer. What I find is what I call I was just doing my job mentality. And it makes it very difficult for people to articulate their value. And that's really what I consider one of my primary roles, is just kind of pulling that information out of them.
That's so true. And I work with a lot of career changers as well. And so many people say, if I could just get in front of someone, I know that I could convince them, but they don't have a sense for how to articulate that their skills are transferable.
Yes, exactly.
And is there something that you have found either in this COVID era or even before that your clients are, it comes how do I say this? That they find surprising when they are embarking on a job search, often for the first time in many years?
Yes, what I find is that they are very surprised when I tell them that spending 8 hours a day submitting web applications is not a good idea.
Yeah, spray and pray does not work.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. And that mythology is out there. It says, the more applications you submit, the more likely you are to find the job.
Do you think it was ever true that applying online was truly the most effective way to get a job? I mean, I started working in the classified era, but I never got a job through classifieds.
Yeah. Occasionally I'll run into a client who tells me, well, I got my last job, applying online. And I go, bless you.
I know, right? You're in the minority.
Congratulations. Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest surprises that that people, when I start working with somebody, and you'll occasionally see me putting up a post or something about that on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, somehow somebody has told them that they need to put in 50 applications a week. Sometimes I'll see on our local news, well, before the pandemic, job fair, and they interview people who are at the job fair, and somebody says, well, I put in 50 applications last week and I haven't heard back from a single one. What's wrong with these folks? And I just want to reach through the TV set and grab them and shake them.
It is a pervasive myth. And I've always questioned, well, was it ever really the greatest way to apply for jobs? And I would argue no. And 9 times out of 10, when I talk to people, it's more that they got their jobs through someone they knew or a bold boss. And the networking was always part of the equation. I just don't think that they ever consider that job search.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly true. And I will give you a very personal example. I've gotten, I think, all of the jobs that I ever had through referrals, except for the job that I got fired from for poor performance.
Really?
Does that tell you something?
There you go. Well, I'm trying to think. I maybe got 1 or 2 freelance jobs through applying online. But they didn't pay very well. So maybe that was telling as well.
Yeah, that's a good indicator.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not all it's cut out to be. So what advice do you give someone who is looking to get started on a career move? How do you recommend that they launch the process?
Well, the first thing I tell people, because often when you initially encounter a job seeker, and I'm sure you've had this experience, is they'll tell you, well, I just need a resume because I'll take any job I can get. And again, just like the applying online, that's kind of a myth out there that says, that the broader I cast the net, the better off I'll be, when in point of fact, the opposite is true. I will sometimes speak to a prospective client and basically get that message from them. I say, well, I'd love to help you, but you're not ready to have my help yet. And I will actually refer them to a couple of my colleagues that do, very targeted career exploration. because when a client comes to me, I want them to be able to say to me, I'm targeting at most 3 areas and preferably just 1 or 2, and here's the type of jobs I'm looking for. Here are some examples of postings I've seen that look interesting. And then I can help them. So there is an awful lot of research and self-reflection that goes in at the foundation of your job search. And if you lay that foundation, then, the other parts will come not easily, perhaps, but they will probably come more fluidly than, they would if you're just kind of flailing around and throwing stuff out there and hoping it sticks.
It sticks. No, I agree with that. And I think there is a lack of education out there around, number one, the need for a targeted resume, but also the idea that if you're really unclear on your target, then you're not ready for the writing stage yet. You really do you're still in the career exploration step, and skipping that step will elongate your search for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It will definitely elongate your search, and you're going to get very frustrated and probably very burnt out.
Yeah. No, we see it all the time. Well, now speaking of burnout, what advice do you have for people that have a resume, they have been job hunting, and it's not going well? What's the best way to regroup for them?
Yeah. Well, regrouping, I try to do a diagnostic with them. Which part isn't working? Are you submitting resumes and not getting any responses? Okay, let's take a step back and look at, is your resume speaking to the needs of the types of employers you're targeting? If your resume is getting submitted and you're getting calls for interviews, okay, what's not working in the interview process? So there's a diagnostic process that I try to go through with people, just to see where they are.
You're right, because it is a pipeline, right? It's not just resume job. There's other steps that go into that, from the phone screening to now a Zoom call to maybe a group call to a final call. And there's parts where things can break down that have truly nothing to do with the resume.
Yeah, they don't have anything to do with the resume. You're really qualified. And, people are, and I understand this, some people are naturally, they're more introverted. They don't like to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And that can be a fairly big hurdle for people to get over. Even though I've worked through their resume with them, and I remind them of all the good things that we found, and I said, those are your stories. Go back, look at your resume, go back at the things that we talked about, because when I interview people to collect information for their resume, they have a copy of that. I said, and let's just go back through some of those things and look at your resume, because sometimes when you're talking to them, you say, oh, that's a good story too. Let me put that, let's get that in your resume as well. So people just don't like to talk about themselves. And I don't, I just tell them, don't think of it as boasting, as long as you're not exaggerating,
right?
Heaven forbid lying, just talk about yourself and be convinced that you are that person, that can in fact really help them. And I love one thing. I'm guessing you're very familiar with Liz Ryan's work as well. And my favorite phrase and I don't even know where she wrote this. Maybe it's in the Reinvention Roadmap, or she wrote it another time. My favorite phrase is, don't be a sheepy job seeker. Put yourself out there, be confident. And, I think it's a particular problem for women. In fact,
I think so too.
I work with a colleague who, she does the confidence building and for women, and I do the resume writing. But she says, that's just a huge barrier for women. And most of the women that we work with jointly, are actually pretty high-end, very competent, in some cases pretty powerful women. And yet here they are. They're like sheepy job seekers. It's like, what?
That's so true. And I've always felt like you brought up the point of the stories and getting those in your resume. Telling a story doesn't feel like bragging.
Yeah.
You're not saying, I'm number one in sales. It's when I did this and this, I ranked number one in sales.
Yeah.
So then, and I think I find that with women, that's an approach that sometimes resonates with them, because you're right. And I don't know why we're like this, but we tend to shy away from speaking about ourselves positively.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So what words of wisdoms do you have for someone who can go in lots of directions? We talked about the need for career exploration. Where should they look to try to get support with career exploration? How should they go about that so that they can narrow down their focus?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I tell folks that have a diverse skill set that most of those skills are going to be required in whatever next job they need, all of the soft skills. And even some of your hard skills can be transferable and put to use in a different environment. So it's more what skills are emphasized in a particular role. So that's where I would say they want to informational interview folks. So what I tell them is to do informational interviews with folks in roles that you probably could do, but you just want to get a better sense of what that really looks like. And then also to do some research about where are your skill sets most in demand other than wherever you are currently, and really target those industries. Do a lot of time to do research. Job boards are actually wonderful for one thing. They're wonderful for research because you can get a sense of what a lot of different companies are wanting for roles like you. You can figure out your keywords. You can do a lot of things like that. But your primary goal is in choosing what direction to go next is to look at, where am I going to be the best fit? And to do that, you can do those informational interviews. And where are my skills in demand? And that's another part of it. So you try as best you can to balance those two questions against each other.
Sometimes I've recommended that people make a list of their soft skills and some hard skills, and then literally enter it into Google or Indeed and and type in the word jobs at the end, and see what comes up on Indeed or Google for jobs. Have you ever tried that, or is there a place where you send people to try and see what other industries or roles require those sorts of skills?
No, that's actually a great suggestion. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any for me.
Thank you.
Because research is hard. It's hard. Sometimes people don't know where to start. But yeah, if you have any other resources, I'd love to hear it, because I work with a lot of people too that are just trying to figure out where it makes the most sense to do a pivot. Yeah.
And yeah, I will often, I have a skills assessment that I sort of generated and sort of came from one of my colleagues that just has a whole bunch of action verbs in it. And I ask people to go through that assessment and circle all the ones that they think they have, and then go back and check maybe the top 5 in a particular category that they're also really good at. And so I do that, especially when folks are a little uncertain as to their direction. And
that's great, because you're right. The key is to find something that's at the intersection of what you can do, what you're good at, what you like to do, and then what the market will bear.
Yeah, exactly.
That's excellent. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, Sharon, is there something that just drives you crazy or most nuts when it comes to job seeker or client mishaps? What mistake do you see people making over and over again?
Well,
maybe we've already talked about it. I don't know.
Yeah, we've already talked about some of them. Here's the one that really does drive me nuts. I work with a client. We get their resume all up to snuff. We're in the job search strategy part, and they send me a completely mangled version of the resume that we generated, saying, "Well, I talked to a friend." Who said, "Oh, I need to cut this back to one, that I absolutely have to cut this back to one page." And I said, "Well, what expertise does your friend have?" "Oh, they work in HR."
Yeah. HR is big.
HR is a very broad field. Yeah. And not to disrespect any of our HR colleagues, but those who actually have training and expertise in HR and have gotten certifications or degrees or whatever in the field, there are a lot of them, but especially if you work for a small company, you just came up, you started as the HR assistant, and then you got promoted, and all of the knowledge that you have is whatever the person who you report to has, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it can be very frustrating, and I try to talk them back down off that ledge as best I can.
Well, yeah, I've always said, look, everyone has an opinion, and so run the resume by 5 people. If 3 people say the same thing, then we have a trend. But otherwise, let's assume it's an opinion, and because there's no one right answer for so much of this. So much of what we all do is based on gathering the feedback of lots of recruiters and LinkedIn experts and career coaches and all of that, and try to come up with a strategy that benefits our clients. So yeah, I hear you when people try to turn themselves into a knot based on one person's feedback, and then they'll go to someone else and get something completely different, and then they're like, this is all wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, one of my jokes is, and I tell this regularly in workshops when people ask questions about how long should my resume be, yada, yada. I say, okay, so here's the point. First of all, if you ask 3 resume writers that question, you'll get 6 different answers.
That's so true.
And second, the real answer to all of that is, it depends.
It depends. That's my favorite answer, I know.
Yeah.
Except for to my kids. Yeah. My favorite answer to my kids is no.
Yeah. Right.
No, yep. I agree completely. And in terms of resume length, I don't know where I saw this, but it was something like the majority of people say they prefer a 1-pager, but then when you look back at who they've hired, the majority were 2-pagers. Which I thought, I found that was interesting, because what we think we want and what we actually work with are often 2 different things.
Yeah, right. And what they're probably thinking of is that they probably reviewed the first page in more detail, and then they went to the second page to see what additional information might be handy. So they remember that first page, and they may not really remember the second page that much.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to ask you now about discrimination when it comes to hiring practices. It's been, it's made a lot of headlines lately, but you and I both know that ageism, sexism, racism, all that has been in our landscape for quite some time. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic and how you help your clients to navigate that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a bit of discouraging news on this front, that there are many, many companies, and we've seen a lot of examples of this now recently, who are talking the talk. Yes, we're looking for a really diverse workforce, and diversity is really important, and we hire for diversity. And when you come right down to it, I've seen far too many of my clients that find, when they're actually interacting with companies, that the companies are actually really challenged to walk the walk. I have a lot of clients that are 50 plus because, And I've also recently had some more minority clients, and boy, I could tell you some stories. We don't have enough time. Of things that have happened to them. But basically, you can age-proof your resume to a certain extent. If you are a minority or come from a specific racial or ethnic background, and you have a name that reflects that background. I've actually had clients ask me if they should change their name.
Yeah, same.
And I'm like, I don't know.
No, that feels wrong.
Yeah, right. So what I really do is, for all of these clients, I do my very best to help them highlight and understand what their value is to their next employer. And do research to find those companies who really do hire based on ability to do the job, and not personal characteristics. So, I know if I'm working with a client here in Columbus, Ohio, I have a good sense of where I can send folks where they will most likely have a good experience and be considered based on their qualifications rather than all the extraneous factors.
All the other
factors. But I don't have a good sense of that nationally. So that's why, again, I'm going to go back to informational interviewing. You really have to do that. Glassdoor has some of that, but Glassdoor, I'm kind of two minds about it, because I am
too.
I think you get a lot of folks who either write glowing reviews because their boss told them to, or they are truly folks that are, really disgruntled for whatever reason, and they may be valid reasons, but, So
and it's sort of like Yelp. People usually don't feel compelled to write a review unless they loved it or they hated it. There's sort of no in between. And I have also heard about sort of forced or paid responses on Glassdoor. But yeah, I think informational interviewing is a great way to get around that and really get some good intel. You can also just do a search on the company and look at the pictures of the people working there, and that might give you some clue as to some of their practices.
Yeah, and look who's working there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, again, I agree with Liz Ryan that says if a company can't look past your identities to your skills, they don't deserve you.
Yeah, agreed. I know. Yeah, you would be so miserable in a company that made determinations based on those kinds of factors.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And you could be pretty sure that if you're, if you are, a minority or a person of a certain age, that's just not going to be a good fit once you get there. Now, the other thing I will say about age discrimination is that it actually, people think, oh yeah, the over 50 crowd, they're all, you're impacted by age discrimination. Young folks are also affected by age discrimination, because I've once worked with college students, I have kind of a soft spot in my heart for those folks.
Well, they're in a quandary because they don't have always the experience, and maybe they couldn't afford to take unpaid internships and things like that, and they don't have the experience that sometimes the companies say they need.
Yeah, right. And they're kind of in a bind, So occasionally, and usually it's the son or daughter of a friend or a friend or client or something. And I work with them. I said, okay, so let's just go combing through everything, and let's go through your course projects. Let's go through the fact that you worked as a restaurant server or you worked in retail. And let's get the transferable skills out there for you. And I think that's helpful. And then I had a client who I believe is in her early 30s who had climbed the corporate ladder like crazy and was super qualified. I mean, like super qualified. I don't, as I look over all the folks I've worked with, I would say, wow, this client was just absolutely outstanding. So there was one problem. No matter what she did and how she tried, in her LinkedIn profile photo and in her presentation when she went for interviews, they said, "You look too young." I'm like,
wow. That's crazy.
She was literally ready for, the level right below the C-suite. She was.
Wow.
They all said, "You look too young." Like, what? So that's age discrimination.
Yeah, no, it absolutely happens. Absolutely. Yeah. That's frustrating. Goodness. All right. Well, again, shifting gears again, I want to ask you one of my favorite questions that I get a lot of times when you're in a group setting or a party back when we were allowed out of our houses. And they say, I'm getting ready to job search. What are one or two things that I absolutely have to have? What are the two biggest tools that you think someone needs to embark on a career journey?
Okay, the number one thing that I tell folks is before you start, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is ready to go, because that's the biggest tool. And it's not just your profile, but your engagement, how you reach out and you connect to others. Lay that groundwork first, because that will then help you use LinkedIn as a key part of your job search strategy. So, before you even jump in, let's make sure we have all the parts and pieces here that we need. And then I also remind people of some other just sort of basic things that they need, like they need a dedicated email address, Gmail preferably.
Yeah.
They need to check the voicemail message on their cell phones.
Right. Yeah. All the little things that sort of make your brand. I agree with that. And to your point, LinkedIn is just, I'm with you that it is the number one tool. I wouldn't have said that 10, 15 years ago, but now it's the world's greatest database to expand your network, do your research, and then also to be found. So it's sort of that trifecta.
Yeah, right. I had a great example of that. I had I'm just finishing up working with a client who, let's say, was LinkedIn averse. Initially, she's like, I don't know. But, she's one of the many folks who was laid off. And her colleagues were basically telling you got to be on LinkedIn. You got to be on LinkedIn. Well, we've got her profile up and running pretty well. She just got her first inquiry for freelance work.
And they found her on LinkedIn. Yep. I mean, people go on and on about keywords and resumes. Because of my faith and yours too in the online job boards, to me, but keywords in LinkedIn are really powerful because the algorithm really does catapult people to the tops of searches when it's done right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then there are a couple of other pretty old-fashioned tools like books.
Oh.
I really do recommend Liz Ryan's Reinvention Roadmap. I think that's a great place, especially if you're not quite sure what your next step should be.
Okay.
And then the oldie but goodie, what color is your parachute?
Your parachute with Dick Bold, yep.
Yep. So, because not everybody can really, not everybody can afford to hire a career coach.
Yeah.
And, those are good resources,
The What Color is My Parachute? I mean, they're in their 8th edition. His work is so it's evergreen.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I think that's really good. And then I do really recommend working with a professional resume writer and career coach. And again, not everybody can afford that. And that's why we put all of that free or very low cost stuff out there. And that's why I teach workshops for our local public libraries.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so much help out there between local job clubs and schools and libraries and just what people are putting out on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But it is hard to tell your own story. Sometimes it's hard to write about yourself. A lot of times it's your own blood, sweat, and tears is hard to be objective about.
Yeah, right. Or you don't even see it.
Right. Yeah, because you're too close to it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Well, Sharon, I have listed 4 different places for people to reach out to you. Your resume coach, the K-12 performance, and LinkedIn Biz. You have many, many roles that you perform. So I'd love to hear from you. What's next for you in 2021?
Okay, so in 2021, and I've actually been sort of working on this, but the current pandemic has, kind of changed my plans a little bit. But what I'm working on is I started a brand new workshop called Grow Your Business with LinkedIn for small business owners. And I actually had back in 2019, I actually held that workshop, I think, 3 or 4 times. And then, of course, stuff happened.
Sure.
And so I've done a beta test of this. And for 2021, I'm hoping to get back to the in-person workshops as well. But what I'm really going to do in 2021 is to create a Zoom version of that. So that I can actually, anybody anywhere in the country can hop on if they're a solopreneur or a small business owner or something. And, for a very reasonable price, hopefully get some good advice. At least that's what the folks who attended my workshops said.
Oh, how wonderful. So if people want to keep up with you and find out more about those classes, as I said, I listed the Resume Coach, K-12 Performance, and LinkedIn Biz 614 on your bio. Yeah. Are those the 3 best places to keep tabs on you, or how would you like people to find you?
That's actually the best way to do it, is just to look on my pages. They're not quite up to date now. Part of what's happened, and I don't know if this happened to you, is that I've gotten more busy than I expected to be just working with clients right now, and of course, clients always come first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's been a really, really busy time for those of us in the career space. There's a lot of people that need our help or preparing just in case.
Yeah, just in case. And that's the big thing. Yeah, I actually wrote an article, and I do not have a crystal ball. Back in September 2019, I wrote an article that's published on LinkedIn, and the title was, "Currently Employed? Your Next Layoff is Coming."
Oh, you jinxed it.
I'm like, well, it's true. It wasn't, I did not.
The layoffs have been occurring for ages. I mean, we lived through 2008. They didn't. Yeah. They hit different industries at different times. This is much more large scale. Plus the whole, as you said, the uncertainty piece. But this has been going on a while.
Yeah, this has been going on, and actually, the prompt for that was that in a single week, I got, I think, 2 or 3 pretty frantic calls saying "I need a resume right now" calls, because I just got laid off and I wasn't expecting to.
Yeah. 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 They didn't dig their well before they were ready to drink.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, it happens. And it's human nature to put it off. It's sort of like doing your will. People are really bad about it. So
yeah, I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it won't happen. Well,
yeah, and then it does. Oh gosh. Well, Sharon, thank you so much. You gave such great advice and offered so many wonderful resources. I'm excited to share with people. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. I'm really so honored, quite frankly, to be on your podcast. Because,
oh, goodness. Well, I love the content that you produce on LinkedIn. The comments you've made on my posts are really insightful. So I was excited to have you on.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure we'll see each other out there on LinkedIn.
There you go.
Okay.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's skim online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.